There has been development relatively quickly of a new extended range aerial munition, Iran, that the U.S. is going to provide. And then there are some calls for another more sophisticated air-launched missile called the JASM, Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile, for Ukraine, because F-16s can launch those. Those are low observable, meaning they're very effective against defended targets. So this is a work in progress, but I think we're generally seeing now more movement toward Western provision of longer-range munitions for Ukraine to use.
Vladimir Putin says Russia will not bow to US pressure, but admitted Donald Trump's new oil sanctions could cause problems for his economy. The Russian leader described the move as an unfriendly act that does nothing to strengthen Russian-American relations, and that no self-respecting country ever does anything under pressure. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has been speaking about the sanctions this evening.
Look, the president has always maintained that he would implement sanctions on Russia when he felt it was appropriate and necessary. And yesterday was that day. I think the president has also long expressed his frustration with Vladimir Putin and, frankly, both sides of this war. And he's always said in order to negotiate a good peace deal, both sides need to be interested in a good peace deal. And he feels as though, unfortunately, from the Russian side as of late, he has not seen enough interest and enough action in terms of moving the ball forward towards peace. And so a meeting between these two leaders is not completely off the table. I think the president and the entire administration hopes that one day that can happen again. But we want to make sure that there's a tangible, positive outcome out of that meeting.
Meanwhile, President Zelensky has welcomed the EU's 19th sanctions package against Russia as he met European leaders in Brussels today.
Sanctions limit Russia's war machine, but they also put pressure on the people who influence politics, corporations, Putin's inner circle, and Russian oligarchs, and the entire state system. Thousands of influential people in Russia must clearly feel and understand that Putin and this war are a deadly threat to them, threat to their lives and their money and their future. That's why we should act without delay. We waited quite a while for the 19th sanctions package, but it is finally approved. Thank you for that. This is a great success. Thank you so much, dear leaders. Now it's important to fully put into an action.
Okay, President Zelensky also pushed for the EU to seize frozen Russian assets, admitting the conversations he had today, as you were hearing there, were not simple. Let's speak to William Courtney, former Special Assistant to the President of the United States on Russia, Ukraine and Eurasia, and Senior Fellow at the RAND think tank. William, welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
Now, President Zelensky went to Brussels hoping for coordinated action on Russian assets. He got plenty of hugs from President Macron and even Chancellor Merz, but didn't what he get fall short of what he wanted?
Well, it falls short, but it is progress from several months ago. The European Central Bank has been reluctant to see this go forward because it's concerned that it could damage the reputation of the euro. And then Euroclear in Belgium, which holds most of the Russian central bank reserves, has also been concerned about its reputation. So this has been a slow process, but earlier it was possible to borrow against the revenue from the profits, if you will, from the investments by those frozen Russian assets. And now the European Union is going a bit further. And this is all significant progress.
When you say it's going further, how much further? How will it change things positively for Ukraine?
Well, it's not yet clear how this is going to come out. There seems to be a process that is involving a continuing effort to persuade minds in Europe, and particularly the ECB and Euroclear, that these resources need to be made available for Ukraine. And so the resources, unless Russia were to pay restitution to Ukraine for its damages, that these resources would be used for reconstruction or recovery in Ukraine. So Europe is really making a Herculean effort in this area.
Just over a week ago, The President of the United States suggested that he might allow Ukraine to attack Russia with Tomahawk missiles. And then, of course, that went away. There was talk of the meeting in Budapest. That's also gone away. The Europeans are expected to step into the breach. They haven't yet, have they? How could they?
Well, the issue of the array of weapons that is important for Ukraine is one that's partly technical. For example, the Tomahawk missiles, they are not available in large quantity for ground launch. The United States has a system called Typhoon, but not very many units of this to launch these missiles. Typically, these missiles are launched by naval ships. So there is a question about whether other possibilities make more sense. There has been development relatively quickly of a new extended range aerial munition, Iran, that the U.S. is going to provide. And then there are some calls for another more sophisticated air-launched missile called the JASM, Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile, for Ukraine, because F-16s can launch those. Those are low observable, meaning they're very effective against defended targets. So this is a work in progress, but I think we're generally seeing now more movement toward Western provision of longer range munitions for Ukraine to use. And Ukraine, I might point out, has been very responsible in its use of these munitions. Unlike Russia, which uses its drones and rockets to attack civilian targets, the Ukrainians attack military targets and war-supporting industries such as oil refinery in Russia.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in just a moment or two, William. But when it comes to the president's policy on Russia, people have called him Taco Trump. They say he's flipping, flopping. Others say he's playing next-level chess. How would you characterize it? Because it's been all over the place in the last week or so.
Yes, so there has been some change. I think to some extent the White House had hoped that its earlier strategy of not imposing new sanctions on Russia, which it has not until today, and not providing more military aid to Ukraine might help create a positive atmosphere for negotiations. But the way negotiations work with Russia and Soviet Union before that is really only if there is leverage for bargaining leverage for a negotiation can one work successfully. So, for example, in the 1980s, the West developed missiles to counter Soviet missiles aimed at Europe. And as a result, a treaty was possible that eliminated those missiles on both sides. So I think the Trump administration now is learning that it really needs more leverage to get the kind of ceasefire or other kind of agreement that it seeks with Russia.
And when the Russians say, look, in the end, we've got to address the fundamentals. We're concerned about security. We want security guarantees. How do you interpret that? And does Russia genuinely think that a strong, independent, Western-leaning Ukraine is a security threat to Mother Russia?
Yes. In July 2021, President Putin wrote a long essay on Ukraine, which basically argued that Ukraine is not legitimate as an independent state, only as part of Russia. So this is not about enlargement of NATO or enlargement of European Union. This is about the fundamental existential role of Ukraine. So I think what we're seeing now is Russia is overplaying its hand, its maximalist position, which essentially demands that Ukraine give up, surrender, and that the President Zelensky and his government leave, and Russia determine who will be the new leaders of Ukraine. And that's unacceptable to Ukraine, and it's unacceptable to its Western partners.
All right. William Courtney, former U.S. Special Assistant to the President on Russia, Ukraine and Eurasia, and Senior Fellow at the RAND think tank. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on Times Radio.